The ultimate test for us of what a truth means is the conduct it dictates or inspires. These words from William James didn't just describe a philosophical position, they launched a revolution in how we think about truth itself. For centuries, philosophers had been wrestling with the nature of truth, asking whether our ideas correspond to some ultimate reality out there in the world. James took a radically different approach, one that would forever change not just philosophy, but psychology, science, and how we navigate our daily lives. James called his approach pragmatism, and at its heart lies a deceptively simple question. Instead of asking whether something is true in some abstract sense, why not ask whether it works? This wasn't mere intellectual laziness or a cop-out from the hard questions of philosophy. Rather, James was proposing something far more sophisticated, that the meaning and truth of our ideas should be measured by their practical consequences, by what difference they make in our actual experience of living. To understand why this was so revolutionary, consider how we typically think about truth. When we say, the Earth orbits the Sun, we usually mean this statement corresponds to some objective fact about celestial mechanics. James didn't necessarily disagree with this, but he added a crucial insight. What makes this statement valuable to us isn't its abstract correspondence to reality, but what it allows us to do. It helps us navigate, predict seasons, launch spacecraft, and understand our place in the cosmos. The truth of the statement lives in its consequences, in how it guides successful action. This pragmatic approach emerged from James' deep immersion in psychology and his recognition that human beings are fundamentally active, purposeful creatures. We don't encounter the world as passive observers trying to mirror reality in our minds. Instead, we are constantly acting, choosing, solving problems, and adapting. Our ideas aren't just pictures of reality, they're tools for living. A good idea, from this perspective, is one that helps us navigate our environment more successfully, that opens up new possibilities for action, that solves problems we actually face. James applied this thinking to some of the most profound questions humans ask. Take religious belief, for instance. Rather than getting bogged down in whether we can prove God's existence through logical arguments or empirical evidence, James asked a different question. What are the practical consequences of religious belief in a person's life? If belief leads to greater meaning, moral purpose, psychological well-being, and constructive action, then it has pragmatic value regardless of whether we can definitively prove the metaphysical claims involved. This doesn't mean James was advocating for wishful thinking or that any belief is as good as any other. Pragmatism includes rigorous testing, but the testing happens in the laboratory of lived experience rather than in abstract logical systems. Ideas that consistently lead to failure, frustration, or harm fail the pragmatic test, while ideas that reliably guide us towards successful outcomes prove their worth through their fruits. The brilliance of James' insight becomes even clearer when we consider how pragmatism operates in our contemporary world. Think about how we evaluate new technologies. We don't judge smartphones or social media platforms primarily on whether they correspond to some ideal form of communication. We judge them on whether they actually help us connect, inform, and accomplish our goals. When an app repeatedly crashes or a platform spreads misinformation, we abandon it not because it fails some abstract truth test, but because it fails to work in practice. This pragmatic approach has transformed fields far beyond philosophy. In psychology, therapeutic approaches are increasingly evaluated not just on their theoretical elegance but on their practical effectiveness in helping people live better lives. In business, strategies are judged by their results rather than their adherence to abstract principles. In science, theories prove their worth through their ability to generate successful predictions and guide effective action. Even in our personal relationships, we often intuitively apply pragmatic thinking. We evaluate advice not primarily on whether it sounds theoretically correct, but on whether following it actually improves our relationships. We judge our own beliefs and habits by asking whether they're serving us well, whether they're helping us become the people we want to be. James recognized that this approach requires intellectual humility. If truth is tested through consequences, then our beliefs must always remain open to revision based on new experience. What works in one context might not work in another. What seemed true yesterday might prove inadequate tomorrow. This creates not relativism, but a more dynamic and responsive relationship with truth, one that keeps us learning, growing, and adapting. The enduring power of James' pragmatism lies in its recognition that truth and human flourishing are intimately connected. Ideas that consistently contribute to human flourishing, that help us solve real problems and live more fulfilling lives, demonstrate their truth through their effectiveness. This doesn't diminish the importance of truth, it relocates it from abstract correspondence to lived consequence, making it more rather than less relevant to how we actually live. Subscribe to The Psychology of William James to explore more of his timeless ideas.